7 young men. A cave, and one of the greatest miracles in history. They slept for 309 years. When they awakened, the world had completely transformed. The empire had fallen. Religion had changed. They couldn't recognize their cities. It was as if they had been transported to an alien planet. But the truth is, they hadn't simply been sleeping. Time itself had stopped. Through a lost power, these 7 youths witnessed something even stronger than death itself. And this story, continues even today. This isn't merely a legend. It's a real miracle mentioned in the Quran. But what about you? If you were in the same situation, what would you do? Here is that incredible story that unfolded in those dark days, in the city of Ephesus, where tyranny reigned supreme, the darkest hour before dawn. Emperor Decius' reign was one of history's darkest periods. He ascended to the throne in 250 CE, taking upon himself the mission to completely eradicate those who believed in one God. Christians, along with everyone who rebelled against Rome's polytheistic system, were punished with death. The city of Ephesus was at the center of this terror. Corpses hanging at every street corner, people burning alive in the squares, families executed before their children's eyes. Decius wasn't content with merely killing believers. He wanted to make examples of them, to terrorize, to completely destroy faith itself. Whoever believes in one God shall die. This decree was posted throughout the city. And everyone knew Decius wasn't joking. In such an environment, 7 young men came together, all from different families, different professions. But they all shared one thing in common: their unshakable faith in Allah. The gathering storm, the first we meet, is the son of a noble family, known for his brilliant intellect and courage in his 20s. But he could no longer live in the palace. His father wanted to force him to sacrifice to the Roman gods. Son, abandon this madness. Worship the Roman gods, or they'll kill us all. Maximilian's response was clear. Father, I cannot worship anyone other than Allah, who is one. I am willing to die for this. Iamblichus was in the same situation, the child of a merchant family, but a determined young man who would never abandon his faith. Though his family tried to secretly smuggle him out of the city, he didn't want to leave his friends behind. Martinianus, Dionysius, Iohannes, Serapion, and Constantinus. 7 different stories, but one shared faith. These 7 youths would meet secretly, encouraging one another, worshipping together. But remaining in the city had become impossible. Decius' soldiers were searching every house, finding and killing everyone who believed in one God. The night of decision that night, they held their final meeting. "We can't stay here anymore," said Maximilian. "Either we flee or await death." "Where can we flee?" asked Iamblichus. "The emperor's reach extends everywhere." Then Martinianus spoke. "Outside the city, in the mountains, there are empty caves. We'll hide there. Allah will guide our way." The decision was made. The 7 youths would escape from the city that night, but their hearts were heavy with uncertainty. What awaited them in the wilderness? How long could they survive? Would they ever see their families again? Yet their faith was stronger than their fears. They had entrusted themselves completely to Allah's will. Into the unknown, under the cover of darkness, they silently left the city. They carried only a little food and clothing. Their plan was simple: hide in the mountains, wait until conditions improved. But Allah's plan was far greater. As they advanced through the mountains, they found a natural cave. The interior was spacious, with clean air circulation. Invisible from outside, a perfect refuge. It was as if it had been created specifically for them. "This is perfect," said Dia. "Water is nearby too, and fruit trees. We can stay here for a while." But Constantinus was worried. "What if Decius' soldiers find us?" Maximilianus smiled. "Then we die. But at least we die with our faith intact." The divine sanctuary, they spent their first nights in the cave. They prayed together, trusted in Allah, made plans for the future. Among them was a beautiful friendship, a brotherhood that transcended blood relations. Days passed. Fugitive news came from the city. Decius had become even harsher. Believers in one god were being killed en masse. The city was like hell itself. The 7 youths knew they could never return. The cave became their world. Each morning, they would gather for prayer, thanking Allah for his protection. During the day, they would forage for food, tend to their simple needs, and in the evenings, they would sit together, sharing stories of the prophets, discussing the Quranic verses they had memorized. Their faith grew stronger each day. Far from the corruption and idolatry of the city, they felt closer to Allah than ever before. The cave wasn't a prison, it was a sanctuary. The weight of exile, but as weeks turned into months, the weight of their situation began to press upon them. They were young men in the prime of life, cut off from everything they had known. No families to visit, no futures to plan, no certainties except their faith. One evening, they sat in contemplative silence, each lost in thought about the path that had led them here. "Do you think we'll ever see home again?" asked Serapion quietly. "What is home now?" replied Jahans. "Our families worship false gods. Our friends have abandoned the truth. Where is home for those who follow Allah alone?" Martinianus looked up at the cave ceiling, where shadows danced in the firelight. "Perhaps home isn't a place we return to. Perhaps it's a place we create, a place where Allah's presence is felt." These conversations deepened their bond. They were no longer just refugees hiding from persecution. They were brothers united in a sacred purpose. Even if they couldn't yet understand what that purpose might be, the last day of awareness. One evening, they were tired and exhausted. Days of walking, hiding, eating little had worn them all down. They sat in the cave, quietly praying to Allah. The atmosphere felt different that night. There was a profound peace settling over them, as if the very air had become charged with divine presence. The usual sounds of the wilderness seemed muted, and even their own heartbeats seemed to slow. Iamblichus spoke. "Friends, I'm very tired. Let's rest for a while." "Me too," said Serapion. "It's as if my eyelids are closing by themselves." As they prepared for sleep, each felt an unusual sense of completion, as though they had reached the end of one chapter and were about to begin another. They didn't know that this simple act of lying down to rest would become the threshold to one of history's greatest miracles. "Whatever happens," whispered Maximilianus, as drowsiness overtook him, "we face it together, trusting in Allah." That evening, all 7 fell into a deep sleep. But this wasn't an ordinary sleep. Through Allah's power, it was a sleep where time stopped, where history's flow would change. And so began the 7 youths' 309-year journey. The world transforms outside. The world was changing. Empires were falling, religions spreading, cities being built, civilizations coming and going. But inside the cave, time had stopped. Allah protected them. They felt neither hunger nor thirst. They neither aged nor died. They simply ... waited. But why? What was the wisdom behind this miracle? Here lay the real secret. Allah wasn't just saving 7 youths. He was sending a message to future generations, a beacon of hope, proof of a miracle. While they slept, their bodies remained perfectly preserved, as if they had just laid down moments before. Their clothing showed no signs of wear. Their faces remained peaceful and youthful. Even more remarkably, their positions would shift slightly from time to time, as Allah turned them from side to side, ensuring their bodies remained healthy during this supernatural slumber. The forgotten martyrs. Outside the cave, storms raged. Wars were fought. Empires crumbled. Decius died and was replaced by others. Christians were persecuted. Then Christianity became the official religion. Rome fragmented. Byzantium was born. Years, decades, centuries. Even the city of Ephesus changed. The old Roman temples were demolished, and churches were built in their places. People could now believe in one God freely. But most people had forgotten about Ashab Al-Kahf. The persecution that had driven them into hiding became a distant memory. New generations arose, who had never known the terror of Decius's reign. The cave in the mountains was forgotten, overgrown with vegetation, its entrance nearly hidden by centuries of natural growth. Yet Allah had not forgotten. In His infinite wisdom, He He was preparing for the perfect moment when their story would serve its greatest purpose. A new crisis of faith until that day came. The year was 447 CE. During the reign of Emperor Theodosius, Christianity was now the official religion, but society was gripped by a strange debate. Was the day of resurrection real or metaphorical? Some scholars argued, the dead will not be resurrected. This is merely a spiritual meaning. Others insisted, no, there will be a real resurrection. Even the emperor was uncertain about this matter. There was great division among the people. The question had become more than academic, it was shaking the foundations of faith itself. If there was no physical resurrection, what did that mean for the promises of paradise, for the justice of the afterlife, for the very nature of Allah's power over death? It was precisely at this moment that Allah decided to reveal his miracle. The shepherd's discovery. That morning, a farmer near Ephesus was grazing his animals in the mountains. One of his sheep had gone missing, and he was searching for it. While wandering through the mountains, he found an old cave. Maybe the sheep is in there, he thought. As he approached the cave's mouth, he was surprised. A strange light was coming from inside. And sounds, human voices. They were human voices. Fear mixed with curiosity as he listened. Several people were talking inside. But how could this be? This cave had been empty for years. The farmer couldn't resist his curiosity. He slowly entered the cave. The impossible sight, the scene he witnessed, was the shock of his lifetime. 7 young men, safe and sound, sitting as if they had just awakened. Their clothes were old-fashioned, but spotlessly clean. They themselves appeared young and healthy. You ... Who are you? The farmer stammered. Maximilione stood up. We are youths from Ephesus. Who are you? Are you one of Decius's soldiers? The farmer was shocked. Decius? Who is he? This answer shocked all 7 youths. Didn't he know Decius? How could the emperor be unknown? Iamblichus asked, what year is it? The year 447. During Emperor Theodosius's reign. This answer shattered the 7 youths' world. 447. When they had fled, it was the year 250. 200 years had passed. But how? They had just entered the cave yesterday. They had only slept 1 night. The farmer stared at them in amazement. These young men were speaking of Emperor Decius as if they had just seen him yesterday, yet Decius had been dead for nearly 2 centuries. Their clothes, their mannerisms, even their dialect, everything about them belonged to a bygone era. This cannot be, whispered Constantinus. We just lay down to sleep last night. But the evidence was undeniable. The world outside had changed completely, and they had somehow passed through 2 centuries in what felt like a single night of rest. The news spreads like wildfire. The farmer ran back to the city in disbelief. His heart pounded as he struggled to comprehend what he had witnessed. There are 7 young men in the cave. They're alive. They're from Decius's time. People couldn't believe it. Decius, that ancient, tyrannical emperor. It was impossible, but the farmer insisted, his voice trembling with excitement and fear. Even more strange was a detail he had noticed. One of the youths carried old Roman coins in his possession. When those coins were examined, everyone was astounded. They were indeed from Decius's era, but how could they be in such perfect condition after 2 centuries? The blacksmith who first examined the coins held them up to the light, his weathered hands trembling. I've seen ancient coins before, but these look as if they were minted yesterday. The silver is untarnished. The inscriptions are crisp and clear. Word spread rapidly through the marketplace. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Craftsmen left their workshops. Mothers gathered their children to hear this impossible tale. Within hours, the entire city was buzzing with rumors of the miraculous discovery. The religious authorities respond. First came the city's bishop, a learned man named Stephanos, who had spent decades studying the scriptures and the histories of Christian martyrs. He had heard many tales of miracles, but nothing quite like this. Take me to them immediately, he commanded. If this is true, it's the greatest sign Allah has shown us in generations. The bishop's entourage made their way up the mountain path, joined by curious citizens who couldn't resist witnessing what might be a divine miracle. Among them was Theodora, an elderly woman who remembered stories her grandmother had told about the persecutions under Decius. My grandmother spoke of young believers who vanished during those dark days. She whispered to her neighbor, "Could these be the same ones?" When they reached the cave, Bishop Stephanos fell to his knees at the entrance. From within came the sound of confused voices, speaking in the ancient dialect of their time, discussing emperors and events that had passed into history 2 centuries ago. The governor's investigation. News reached Governor Marcus Justinian within the day. A practical man who had seen his share of false miracles and religious charlatans, he was initially skeptical, yet the evidence was compelling enough to warrant personal investigation. Assemble a delegation. He ordered his advisors, "If this is a hoax, we'll expose it. If it's genuine, then we face something beyond our understanding." The governor's party included scholars, historians, and physicians. They brought with them samples of currency from different eras, documents from the imperial archives, and tools to test the authenticity of what they might discover. Dr. Antonius, the court physician, was particularly intrigued. If these men have truly survived 2 centuries without aging, they could provide insights into the very nature of human existence itself. The imperial summons, finally. The extraordinary news reached Emperor Theodosius in Constantinople. The emperor had been grappling with theological disputes that threatened to tear his empire apart. The question of bodily resurrection had become more than academic. It was creating schisms within the church itself. Theodosius was a man of deep faith, but also a pragmatist. He understood that his empire's stability depended on religious unity. A miracle of this magnitude could either strengthen faith or create dangerous new divisions. "Prepare the imperial fleet," he declared to his advisors. "I will see this miracle with my own eyes. If Allah has chosen to reveal his power in our time, the emperor must bear witness." His chief advisor, a cautious man named Patrician Maximus, expressed concern. "Your Majesty, what if this proves to be an elaborate deception? The empire's credibility could suffer." Theodosius silenced him with a gesture. "Maximus, if Allah wills to show his power, no human authority can stand against it. If this is false, the truth will emerge. But if it's real, ... double quotes." He paused, looking out at his capital city. "If it's real, then we are living in extraordinary times indeed." Inside the cave, growing confusion meanwhile. Within the cave, the 7 companions struggled to understand their situation. The farmer's words echoed in their minds, but their hearts rejected what their reason was beginning to accept. Maximilianus examined his hands, his clothes, his reflection in a pool of water near the cave entrance. Everything appeared exactly as it had the night before, yet the world outside spoke of centuries having passed. "Look at us," he said to his companions. "Do we appear different? Do we feel older? Have our clothes decayed? Yet this man speaks of Emperor Theodosius, of whom we've never heard." Iamblichus paced nervously near the cave mouth, occasionally peering out at the landscape. Something felt different about the very air. The quality of light, even the sounds of nature. It was subtle but unmistakable, like waking from a dream to find reality slightly altered. "The trees," he murmured. "When we first found this cave, there was a young oak near the entrance. Now I see an ancient tree, massive and gnarled with age. Could the same tree have grown so large while we slept?" Martinianus had been examining their few possessions. "Our food has not spoiled. Our water skins are still fresh. Even our fire," he gestured toward the remains of their last evening's campfire. "The ashes are still warm, as if we'd only just extinguished it. How can this be? If 200 years have passed, the divine mystery deepens." Dionysius, the most contemplative of the group, sat in quiet reflection. Finally, he spoke. "Brothers, perhaps we're approaching this incorrectly. We're trying to understand Allah's miracle through human logic. But have any of the prophets' miracles followed natural law?" His words carried weight. They had all heard the stories. Prophet Musa's, peace be upon him, staff becoming a serpent. Prophet Isa's, peace be upon him, healing of the sick. Prophet Muhammad's, peace be upon him, night journey to the heavens. Serapion nodded slowly. When Prophet Yunus, peace be upon him, was swallowed by the great fish. Did he experience time as we understand it? When Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, was thrown into the fire, did the flames obey natural law? Constantinus added, "Perhaps what we experienced wasn't sleep at all, but something beyond our comprehension. Perhaps Allah suspended time itself around us. Iohannes, who had been silent throughout this discussion, finally spoke. If that's true, then why? Why preserve us through the centuries? What purpose could Allah have for such a miracle? It was a question that would soon be answered in ways they could never have imagined. The delegation's arrival, the sound of approaching voices, grew louder throughout the morning. The 7 companions could hear the tramping of many feet, the voices of authority giving orders, the general commotion of a large group ascending the mountain. "They're coming for us," said Maximilianus, though his tone held no fear. Their long months of hiding from Decius's persecution had prepared them for a confrontation. "Whatever happens," declared Martinianus, "we face it together, as we always have. Our trust is in Allah alone." When Bishop Stephanos entered the cave, followed by Governor Justinian and their respective entourages, natural law they understood. 7 young men, appearing to be in perfect health, dressed in the style of a bygone era, speaking the ancient dialect with perfect fluency. More importantly, they bore themselves with the unmistakable dignity of those who had suffered for their faith. The interrogation begins. Governor Justinian, despite his amazement, maintained his official composure. "I am Marcus Justinian, governor of Ephesus, in the name of Emperor Decius. State your names and explain your presence in this cave." The 7 companions exchanged glances. The protocol, the titles, even the accent of authoritative everything indicated that their world had indeed changed beyond recognition. Maximilianus stepped forward as their spokesman. "I am Maximilianus, son of the merchant Antiochus. These are my companions. Iamblichus, Martinianus, Dionysius, Iohannes, Seropion, and we are citizens of Ephesus, faithful servants of Allah alone." "And when did you last see this city?" pressed the governor. "Yesterday morning, when we fled from the persecution of Emperor Decius." A murmur ran through the assembled delegation. Dr. Antonius stepped forward, studying the young men with professional interest. "With your permission, Governor, I'd like to examine them physically." The medical examination, what Dr. Antonius discovered, astonished him further. The 7 men showed no signs of advanced age, malnutrition, or the effects of prolonged exposure to the elements. Their teeth were perfect, their skin unblemished, their muscles well developed. "In all my years of practice," he whispered to Bishop Stephanos, "I've never seen anything like this. These men are in perfect health, as if they had indeed slept peacefully for just one night." But the most remarkable discovery came when Dr. Antonius examined their clothing and possessions. The fabric, though clearly of ancient manufacture, showed no signs of deterioration. The leather of their sandals was supple. The metal of their few tools showed no corrosion. "It's as if time itself passed them by," the physician concluded. The historical verification the scholars in the delegation had brought with them extensive records from the imperial archives. Document after document confirmed the reality of Emperor Decius, his persecution of Christians, and the time frame the young men described. Professor Gaius Aurelius, the senior historian, found himself face to face with living witnesses to events he had only read about in ancient texts. "Tell me," he asked, "Iamblichus, do you recall the names of Decius's chief advisors, the structure of his administration?" The questions continued for hours. Every detail the 7 companions provided matched perfectly with the historical record. They described streets that had been demolished centuries ago, officials whose names appeared only in the most obscure documents, customs and practices that had long since vanished. "They're not merely from that era," Professor Aurelius concluded. "They are living embodiments of that time, preserved as if in a divine archive." The theological implications. Bishop Stephanos had been listening to everything with growing excitement. As a student of theology, he immediately grasped the profound implications of this miracle. "Brothers," he addressed the 7 companions, "do you understand what Allah has accomplished through you? You are living proof that He has power over time itself, that He can preserve life beyond all natural limits." Dionysius, nodded thoughtfully. We had begun to sense that our experience was more than ordinary sleep, but the full magnitude, the full magnitude, interrupted the bishop, is that you are Allah's answer to the doubters of our age. There are those who question whether bodily resurrection is possible. You are living proof that it is not only possible, but real. The emperor's arrival, the sound of imperial trumpets echoed through the mountains. As Emperor Theodosius approached with his massive entourage, standard-bearers, cavalry units, court officials, and religious dignitaries formed a procession that stretched down the mountainside. Inside the cave, the 7 companions felt the weight of destiny settling upon them. They had fled from one emperor's persecution, only to awaken and face another Emperor Bautista. As miraculous witnesses, rather than hunted fugitives, Theodosius entered the cave with a mixture of imperial dignity and genuine humility. In the presence of an obvious divine miracle, earthly authority seemed suddenly diminished. "I am Theodosius, by Allah's grace Emperor of Rome," he announced. "I come not as your judge, but as one who seeks to understand Allah's purpose in preserving you through the centuries." The divine purpose revealed, Maximiliano, speaking for his companions, addressed the emperor directly. "Your Majesty, we fled persecution, believing we might die for our faith. We never imagined that Allah would preserve us to serve a greater purpose." "And what do you believe that purpose to be?" asked Theodosius. Martinianus answered, "To serve as witnesses that Allah's power extends over all creation, including time itself, to prove that bodily resurrection is not only possible, but certain." The emperor nodded slowly. The theological crisis that had been tearing his empire apart suddenly had a clear resolution. Here before him stood 7 living proofs that Allah could preserve, restore, and resurrect the human body, the witness to the world. Over the following days, the cave became a pilgrimage site. Thousands came from across the empire to witness the miracle with their own eyes. Scribes carefully recorded every word the 7 companions spoke, creating a permanent record of their testimony. The impact was immediate and profound. The theological debates that had divided communities ceased. Seeing living proof of Allah's power over death and time, few could maintain their doubts about resurrection. But perhaps most remarkably, the 7 companions remained unchanged by their fame. They had no interest in worldly honor or material reward. Their conversation constantly returned to Allah's greatness and the certainty of the afterlife. The choice of eternity. After several weeks of testimony, the 7 companions requested a private audience with Emperor Theodosius. "Your Majesty," said Iamblichus, "you have been generous beyond measure. You offer us homes, wealth, position in your court, but we must decline." The emperor was puzzled. "Why? You could live comfortably, marry, abi familias, enjoy the peace you fought so hard to preserve." Constantinus answered, "Because we have tasted something beyond this world's offerings. For 309 years, we existed in Allah's direct care, free from hunger, thirst, fear, or want. Having experienced that divine peace, how can we return to worldly concerns?" Serapion added, "We feel like strangers in this new world. Our families are long dead, our friends forgotten. But more than that, our hearts no longer belong to earthly matters. The final return we wish to return to our cave," announced Maximilian. "There we will worship Allah until he calls us to himself permanently." Emperor Theodosius was moved to tears. "But surely Allah preserved you to live and teach among us." Dionysus shook his head gently. "Our teaching is complete, Your Majesty. We have served as witnesses to Allah's power over death and time. Now our souls long for the eternal peace we glimpsed during our long sleep." Unable to dissuade them, the emperor granted their request. With great ceremony, the 7 companions returned to their mountain cave, followed by thousands of The second, sleep. That evening, as the sun set over the mountains of Ephesus, the 7 companions prepared for their final rest. They had completed their divine mission, serving as bridges between eras and witnesses to eternal truths. They prayed together one last time, thanking Allah for choosing them for such an extraordinary purpose. Then, as peacefully as they had awakened, they lay down together and passed into eternal sleep. When concerned officials entered the cave the next morning, they found 7 peaceful faces, as if the companions had simply drifted off during prayer. But this time, they would not wake in earthly time. The eternal legacy. Emperor Theodosius ordered that the cave be preserved as a sacred site. A beautiful monument was erected, and the story of Ashab Al-Kahf was recorded in official imperial chronicles. But their influence extended far beyond the Byzantine Empire. As trade routes carried the story across continents, it reached the Arabian Peninsula, where it was preserved in tribal memories until the revelation of the Quran confirmed and immortalized their tale. The modern message. Today, over 15 centuries later, their story continues to inspire. In an age when materialism challenges faith, when death seems final, and hope seems fragile, Ashab Al-Kahf reminds us that Allah's power transcends all limitations. Their message echoes across time. Faith is worth any sacrifice. Allah protects those who trust in Him. Time itself obeys His command. Death is not the end. Resurrection is not only possible, it is certain. In our modern struggles against depression, in our moments of doubt about the afterlife, in our need for proof of divine power, we find in these 7 companions a source of unshakable hope. For they are more than historical figures. They are eternal witnesses to truths that never grow old, miracles that never lose their power, and hope that never dies. Their sleep was temporary, but their awakening is eternal. Their cave was in the mountains of Ephesus, but their light illuminates the world. They slept for 309 years, but their story awakens hearts forever.